Hello, everyone, and welcome to A Rising Tide of History, collaboration between museums, libraries, and municipalities. We are very glad to have our panel here today. We have Ann Mason, the Executive Director of the Heritage Alliance, Dr. Brenda Jeffellers, Manager of the Avoca branch at the Bristol Public Library, and myself, Head Curator at the Birthplace of Country Music Museum. Today, we will be talking about the ways our institutions have collaborated and supported each other over the years, and also how we have adjusted within those programs to the pandemic. Each of our session speakers will be presenting separately, and then after this panel discussion is concluded, we will take questions that you submit in the Q&A box to the right of your screen in the Whova app or desktop website. Be aware that if you are on full screen, you sometimes can't write into that Q&A box, so you might just need to make your screen smaller in order to do that. You also have a session survey that can be found at the bottom of the description for this panel, and you are welcome and encouraged to let us know what you think about the session and your thoughts on other sessions you might be interested in seeing in the future. So be sure and fill that out at the end. But now I'm going to turn it over to Ann, who's going to get us started, and we're ready to start together.
Thank you, Renee. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get this show on the road. There we go. Hopefully everyone can see the screen that I am sharing. And our presentation today is called A Rising Tide of History, Collaboration Between Museums, Libraries, and Municipalities. This is a little bit of who we are. And actually the top picture on the right corner, that's the Washington County Jonesboro Public Library, who we partner with a lot with Heritage Alliance. So I wanted to be sure their building was included in this presentation since we talk about them a lot. And this is us. Mine's slightly longer just because of the Heritage Alliance. We manage so many old buildings and museums. I feel like every time I turn around, we're getting a new old building, which makes partnerships all the more important. So some of the things we're going to be talking about during this presentation. Of course, we have that famous quote, a rising tide lifts all boats, sort of famously attributed to Kennedy. But it's true, of course, when we help others, we typically help ourselves and our own organizations as well. But we're going to be covering how libraries can assist museums with exhibits and programs, how museums can engage with their local libraries to better serve their communities, how museums can partner with the municipalities to achieve larger goals, examples from the field, and how libraries and museums have adapted their programs and services for this new world. So there's just a few things we'll be touching on. And really just to encourage you all to think about ways you can form new partnerships. We don't always think about partnering with our local libraries, but oftentimes we serve the same members of the community. And at the same time, we serve very different members of the community who may have never come to the museum, or maybe our people who come to our museums don't know as much about the local library. And then also how we can better incorporate our local municipalities into what we do. Some of us are managed by states or cities or towns, but others of us aren't. So how do we form these partnerships as well? And it's all about being an asset to your community and the members of your community. All right, so I'm going to go ahead now and turn it over to Dr. Brenda Jeffellers, who's going to talk about the library perspective of all this.
Hi, I'm Brenda Jeffellers, as was said, the current manager of the Avoca Branch Library of Bristol Public Library. And we have a bit of a unique background in that the Bristol Public Library serves two states, one large community that is located in two different adjoining states, Tennessee and Virginia, and has some unique challenges and also some unique opportunities. But the question here is, how can we all work together, all of us, museums, libraries, and municipalities, to advance the agenda of all of the cooperating agencies? I've only been a public librarian for 5 years. The rest of my work years were spent in education, which I find interesting. what can we do for a museum? One of the things that we do is prepare bibliographies. In this case, they usually take the form of flyers or leaflets or brochures that can be picked up by library patrons, that can be distributed at the museum to support exhibits that are happening within the museum. And also they bring people into both places, the librarians and the museums. And yes, Anne, there is another slide. Sorry, I didn't say advance. There you go, thank you. We can conduct research. Anne's going to talk later about some research that we at the Bristol Public Library conducted for Heritage Alliance and for the Washington County, Tennessee Public Library that addressed a patron. All of this research was focused on a patron of the Washington County, Tennessee Public Library, and have a lot of products, and Ann will talk more about that too. Another thing that we can do, as it says on the screen, is provide space for programming. The Washington County Public Library, and I sit on that board, has a very small meeting room, but it is used for the public and by the public. The Bristol Public Library in downtown Bristol has a much larger meeting space and some smaller ones that are also used widely, except during COVID times when we must limit the number of participants per room because we are practicing social distancing. The library can provide guest speakers. Having spent most of my career in education, I like to talk. Teachers do. And I'll be happy to do a program for you. I've done a number for the Heritage Alliance, including educational programs about the cholera epidemic and how it struck Jonesboro, and some about Ray Wells. I'm happy to talk, and I used to do that as an educator too. I can do programs about classroom discipline, how children really learn to read, vocabulary instruction, lots of things. So look at your libraries as sources of guest speakers to support your programming needs. We can, I already said flyers and brochures. Okay, Anne, let's advance this and see what else we have. It's not changing, but I'll start talking anyway.
Yeah, it's not advancing. Give me a minute. I don't know what it's doing, but keep going.
We create displays. Two are in the next slide. One is about, there's Anne. One is about historical romances featuring Julia Quinn's Bridgerton series and Winston Graham's Poldark series, because these are currently very popular in the media. The other display is pandemics in history, in fact and fiction. And we pulled a number of different books in the library that relate to epidemics and pandemics in our history. And you can see a number of them. Pox. This is a fiction work about the 1918 to 1920 flu epidemic. Another nonfiction book, the one that excited both the Bush and the Obama administration, raised their level of concern about pandemics and how we were, in a sense, due or overdue for one. So we pay attention to what is happening in the world and what people's current interests are. We can and will work cooperatively with you, and if you could move it forward, with our partners, including the cities, the towns, the counties, to advance the services that we provide to the community. I do think that much of the audience that comes to museums and many of the people who come to the library are shared from the community. We serve all of them as you do. And the few that we don't share, we want to get in. So yes, we've learned to use Zoom this year. Yes, we've learned to move our programming as you have. And yes, we will continue to work cooperatively with the Radio Bristol Book Club, with scavenger hunts, with the development of any tool that will enable us to reach out. So thank you, Anne. Oh, do you want me to talk about this?
No, I can do it because it kind of leads into
That's
mine.
what I thought this was yours.
But I just put this last slide in here as a project that grew out of research at the library that became a presentation, that became a museum exhibit, and even a book. So this was one of those examples where out of this one partnership, we, you know, reached several audience members and through different mediums. All right. And just follow, you know, what libraries can help you do, you know, cooperatively create rich environments and experiences for our audiences and patrons. That's kind of the goal of all of this. All right, so the Heritage Alliance, that is me. Real quickly, we were founded in 2001. Our mission is really about preservation and history education. Our home base is the town of Jonesboro, even though we're more of a regional organization, but most of our time is spent in Jonesboro because that's where the majority of our buildings are. All our museums are in Jonesboro, and then like our historic one-room schoolhouse as well, and our salvage warehouse. And we do have membership. But because we're very small, and as I said, we have a whole lot of museums and buildings we manage and programs we run. We are a staff of 1 full-time currently, 2 part-time, and then a whole lot of amazing volunteers. So how do we get everything we get done? It is 100% partnerships. And, you know, I kind of remiss to say that we weren't always looking to our local library to form these partnerships originally. We have since corrected that. And how our partnerships with the local library kind of started was actually just through an accident. One day, our previous executive director, Deborah Montanti, was at the library in their archives, because a lot of our libraries have archives. She was sort of in their archives room, and they had a collection of art that they didn't have a really good way to store. It was original art by Ray Wells, who was best known as a children's book author in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, but he was also an artist. And it was like his art, mostly his art school sketchbook, but some illustrations from his books as well. And they just didn't have a good way to store it or to take care of the art currently. So she was like, how about we take this and help you, you know, like preserve this and put it in our archives at the Heritage Alliance. And that was agreed upon. So we took the art, we worked on properly housing it. We actually consulted with an art historian about the best way to, you know, store these pieces and what they should live in. And out of this came an exhibit. The Heritage Alliance had never done a major art exhibit. We do have museum spaces, but they are not designed for art, especially large-scale art exhibitions. So we got a grant from Humanities Tennessee. This program took place in 2018, but it's still like our really great core example of how something, you know, simple as like shared artwork can become something much larger. We got a grant from Humanities Tennessee to frame several pieces of the art, not all of it, because there were over hundreds of pieces of art, but we got a grant to frame several of them. And we were able to do an exhibit at the McKinney Center. And the McKinney Center is it is an art center in Jonesboro, Tennessee. It is operated by the town of Jonesboro. It was the segregated school from 1940 until 1965 when the schools were integrated. So it's very important to the African-American community. And today it's an art center for students from all over the region. So these are just a couple of the samples of the art that were in the project. Very different, a very diverse collection of art. And before we got to the exhibit, we had the art. We weren't sure what to do with it. And we knew a little bit about Ray Wells, but we didn't know a whole lot. So that's where really the library came in. And it went beyond just the Jonesboro Library. It went to the Bristol Public Library as well, where they had been involved in researching Ray Wells and who he was and his trajectory as an artist and an author and an illustrator. First that he started in Jonesboro, where he went, and then how it all led him back to Jonesboro. So, of course, it involved research. And a lot of this research was presented at History Happy Hour, which I'll talk about a little later, but it's a collaborative program we do where researchers and other museums and librarians can come in and share what they're working on with the wider public who may not know about, this research that's going on. So we're researching Ray Wells, we've got the art, we get the grant to put it together, and then, like I said, we realized we needed the space because we cannot do a large-scale art exhibition in our spaces. So we turned to the McKinney Center, which is part of Jonesboro, the municipality, to help us stage this exhibit because he was such an important part of Jonesboro's history. And Ray Wells, when he died, actually left his estate to continue to fund the library in Jonesboro. He left his house to be the library. It wasn't the best use for the house. So actually the house was sold, and the proceeds from selling the house were used to build the building that the Jonesboro Library is in today. So it's kind of like a full circle legacy for him. These are pictures from the exhibit. Some more pictures. And what was really great about this too was that this partnership continued into other programming with libraries. Of course, we had, discussions about art and history as part of the exhibit. We had, diverse audience attend the exhibit. We had a make and take your own book program with the Jonesboro Library where kids could come and make their own little picture books and take them home with them. So that was a great activity to have to get kids interested in writing and illustrating their own work. We did a literacy panel with members from 3 different libraries who talked about the importance of literacy and really what libraries can do for the community. Because we hear that a lot from a local library, like people just don't know the services we have to offer. So it was a way to not only share this history and the art, but share what, the library can do for the community as well. And like I said, this did end up in a published book. You can see down there in the left-hand corner, Dr. Jafellers, with, it's a kid's biography about Ray Wells. And we did a book signing at the Chester Museum. So that was a partnership as well. All right, so I mentioned just a little bit about History Happy Hour. And we call it that, one, because of the time of day it takes place, it's an evening program. But also we like history and it makes us happy. We had our first one actually of our 5th season yesterday evening at the same time as trivia. So unfortunately we weren't able to take part in TAM trivia. But History Happy Hour, we really conceived as a completely collaborative program. Because we know there are so many other museums and researchers and historians in the area who have great work they want to share. But they might not necessarily know where they can share this information, and they want to get it out there. So we started this 5 years ago. We've got a copy of the 2020 schedule and 2021 schedule on here. And we always try to get a diverse range of topics and then a diverse range of historians or presenters. They're not all professional historians. Some of them are, work in national park sites. Like I said, we've had independent researchers come and present their information. Librarians come. But it's a way to share history topics we normally wouldn't be able to share in our museums. We're kind of limited by space and mission of the museum, but this is a way to, get even more information out there. So if you can think about, creating a speaker series, many of us already have that, but if you haven't, think about creating it, and how you could do that. If you don't have space in your museum, maybe there's a building in your city or town that has space, or maybe the library has space. And even if you're worried about rental fees, maybe you can, work out some sort of deal where that won't be as much of an issue. But, there's lots of spaces where you can go and create a program like this of your own. Now, of course, we had to adapt this a little for 2020. The space we're used to presenting History Happy Hour in, as you can see, is a very small room in the Chester Inn. We're used to cramming a lot of people into that space, which has become problematic. We're still not going back into that space for this program in 2021, just to maintain distancing. But there's another shot of Dr. Jafellers, and I'm spacing on the name, Dr. Jafellers. Who was the co-presenter with you?
Oh, Kristen Pearson.
Kristen Pearson from the Bristol Library, sharing the information about Ray Wells. On the right, there is a image of an independent researcher actually from Greenville who had done a lot of research on the African-American enslaved cemetery in Greenville, Tennessee. And then in the middle actually is an image of Appalachian author Mildred Hahn. She was one of the presentations we had last year, a professor from Walter State Community College who actually runs the Mildred Hahn conference with the library there, talked about Mildred Hahn, and it was a way for us to also promote their conference that they do. So we couldn't go back in that little room. So what we did for 2020 for History Happy Hour was we turned it into Zoom, which actually opened up a lot of possibilities. There on the left, you see Jacob Simpson from the Cincinnati Print and Type Museum actually demonstrating the printing presses they have in the museum there in Cincinnati. So we were able to, check in with museums who wouldn't be able to come and present with us in Jonesboro because they're so many miles away, but we could Zoom in with them, which was really neat. So it actually kind of expanded our reach for History Happy Hour, being able to do it through Zoom, which currently right now we still are. And even when we go back in person, we're going to do a hybrid model where people can still access it via Zoom. And, how did we interact with our municipal partners? Well, after we did that art exhibit for Ray Wells with the McKinney Center, we really committed to doing an exhibit with them, every year, or at least every other year. And we have this large collection of textiles in the Heritage Alliance's archives. We had never been able to display all of our quilts and coverlets because, again, limitations of space in our museums. So we partnered with the McKinney Center to be able to display all of our quilts and coverlets in an exhibit this past summer called Stories and Stitches. Now, when we started dreaming about this exhibit in January of 2020, it looked a lot different, but we were able to adapt with the changing times. It was on display in person. People could do like timed social distance entries, but we also did a lot of, digital live streaming with the program. We did a live stream of the opening presentation, and we did special quilt story times and quilt crafts, a lot of it digitally, but there was the opportunity for people to come and see it physically as well. So, that one art exhibit has led to many other exhibits with the McKinney Center. And we did a digital version of the exhibit as well. If people did not feel comfortable going in person, we uploaded through Padlet. Padlet's great for creating quick, easy digital exhibits. So we still on our website, heritageall.org, have this up. We kind of created a digital exhibit hall coming out of last year as a complement to our in-person exhibits. So if you want to go look at some cool quilts, go check it out. And really, the question of the last year was, how do we, the Heritage Alliance, continue to serve our community, during difficult times? And of course, first with the COVID pandemic, when everything first started and businesses were being shuttered or finding new ways to adapt, whether they were selling online or restaurants were doing takeout, one of the things that we pride ourselves on in the Heritage Alliance is our extensive collection of Jonesboro images. We probably have the largest collection of historic images of Jonesboro in our archives. So we quickly began putting these on Facebook and linking them to the businesses that were in these buildings today, and talking about what those businesses were currently doing to, to stay open and, serve the community and sell things during the pandemic. So it was our way that we could use our collections, because anytime we share one of our historic photos, it blows up on Facebook. People love historic photos. It's going to get more shares than anything we do, and we just learned that through social media. So being able to tie these to a business and be like, hey, this is what this business is doing. You can check out their live stream. You can buy from them online. You can pick up curbside, was really one of the ways we tried to continue to give back to the local businesses during that difficult time. And, it was the town appreciated that, and as did the merchants. And then coming out of, the summer, and obviously the need for conversation and change with social justice and, equality and equity, we partnered again with the McKinney Center. Like I said, they are an art center that was once a segregated school, very important to the African-American community. And then in Johnson City, Tennessee, we also serve Johnson City. There is the Langston Center, and Langston was a segregated high school for Washington County until desegregation. And today it is an art center as well. And so we started having conversations with both the McKinney Center and Langston Center about how do we broach these topics and what can we do to further this work. So, we realized that we were all places of resources and information. So we created this racial and social justice starter, which I dropped the link in the chat to the full resource sheet. And we designed it so that, arts educators, teachers, museum workers could all find a section, municipalities could find a section about, information and best practices and, research on this topic to further the discussion. But like essentially we create a bibliography, like a one-stop resource place, and we continue to reevaluate it and grow it. But we felt the need as these organizations to take on this challenge and further this conversation this way. We also created a survey for museums to sort of gauge where they're at in terms of exhibits and programs and being inclusive. I also dropped that survey into the chat as well. We found it beneficial for our organization. So if you'd like to take it, please do so. And it'll actually help us with sort of the data we're trying to collect off of that survey as well. And that is it for me. So I'm going to turn it over now to Renee.
Hello, everyone. I realized I didn't actually probably tell everyone my name, but my name is Renee Rogers earlier. And I'm the head curator at the Birthplace of Country Music Museum in Bristol, Tennessee, Virginia. We are right on the state line, and half of our organization is in one side and the other half is in the other. We opened only in 2014, and we're part of a larger Birthplace of Country Music organization that includes the Bristol Rhythm and Roots Reunion Music Festival and Radio Bristol. And Radio Bristol is actually a live working radio station that is part of the museum exhibits. We are also a Smithsonian affiliated museum. If you can advance the slide, Anne. So we've done quite a lot of work with Bristol Public Library. First off, because it's an obvious collaboration and partnership, and also they are just around the corner from us, so it makes it really easy to form a community partnership and work together. And some of the things that we have done with them is we've worked with them to create additional exhibit resources to go along with exhibits that we have had in the museum. So for instance, here was a Facebook post we put up of the display that the Bristol Public Library created in their in the library itself of books about civil rights. And this went along with our special exhibit for all the world to see, Visual Culture and the Struggle for Civil Rights. So we gave them the extensive bibliography that we got with the exhibit from the NEH on the Road program. They went through their collections and found all the books that were either on that list or ones that were related to it and made this display. And then each of us had a sign in our different spaces, us in our special exhibits gallery, them with the display itself, that actually told people where they could go to the exhibit or where they could go to the library to check out these resources and read more about the subject. And we've done that with a couple of our exhibits with them, but this one in particular was so great because there's so much of an educational focus around it. And you probably can't see what this says in the Facebook post, but it was just calling out that partnership and showing people that they could go to the library. But then someone actually commented to say, great partnership, libraries have a vital role in our society. So you also had people who were glad that there was this partnership happening. If you can advance to the next slide, please. Brenda mentioned earlier about research. Again, this was where we turned to the Bristol Public Library doing For All the World to See. And we had 2 or 3 of our volunteers who wanted to help us with research about stories about the Black community in Bristol during the time of the civil rights movement and the civil rights era. And so they spent a lot of time over at the library, got some help from the librarians in using the microfilm and microfiche machines, and did a huge survey of the Bristol Herald Courier paper that is in their archives there to find a whole bunch of different articles and stories for us to use. And then we were able to share that again on Facebook and again call out that partnership and how important it had been to be able to have that resource and tell people how they can actually go into their local paper and research these things themselves. And then the picture on the right, or on my right, probably your left, is a post that we put up recently when we've had 2 suffrage exhibits at the museum. So one from the Smithsonian Institution and one from the Tennessee State Museum and the Tennessee State Library and Archives. We then again called our friends at the Bristol Public Library and asked them to put together a bibliography for us that they then created, that they could share there and that we could share on our own website as a resource for people who wanted to learn more about women's suffrage and the centennial and the importance of the 19th Amendment. So those were just some like what feel like small ways, but actually had huge impact on the work we were doing and on the exhibits we were sharing with our audience. Next slide, please. Another great way to partner with your local library is on community activities. They have partnered, Bristol Public Library has partnered with us 2 or 3 times now on our Family Fun Day, which is a free entry day to the museum, where we then do a host of different types of activities, often themed around a special exhibit or something in our permanent exhibits. So for instance, this again is a Facebook post about our free Family Fun Day during our Things Come Apart exhibit, which was a STEM focused exhibit. And that was a great partnership because the library came over brought their 3D printer with them, set it up in our theater so that kids and families could come in there, and they all got the chance to print their own guitar pick with like a design on it or their initial on it or that type of thing. And the kids and the adults all loved it, and they got to get this introduction to STEM. They got an introduction to a resource at the library that they might not have known about. And they just got to have fun and walk away with a souvenir that's sort of tied into both of our organizations. Next slide, please. We also partnered on another Family Fun Day where the children's librarian created a guitar coloring craft and came over and gave the kids the chance to design their own guitar and then take pictures of themselves playing it, which was a lot of fun. And then this summer, in response to the pandemic, or I guess it was late spring, early summer, we had actually been contacted by our Virginia Middle School after school program to find out if we had any ideas for things that they could do outside that were educational, as they were socially distanced, but they were still trying to provide activities for their after school programs and their after school kids and their families. And so we partnered with the Bristol Public Library, but also with our Main Street organization, Believe in Bristol, to create a historic downtown Bristol scavenger hunt, which is on all of our websites. You can also like pick it up at the museum and the library, a copy of it. And we each contributed 5 different clues, so that there were a total of 15 clues that took you all around the downtown, brought you into the museum, brought you into the library, got you to see some of the businesses and things that were on offer downtown. So it was also supporting our downtown and as it being a destination and a place for you to come and grab something to eat and take home with you afterwards. So it was a great way for us to partner in a small way in response to the pandemic, but also something that can continue to be something that we put forward for families and tourists and visitors to our area. Next slide, please. One of the big things that we have done with the Bristol Public Library, however, that has been hugely impactful for both of us and for both of our audiences has been the Radio Bristol Book Club. Now, obviously, not everyone has a live working radio station in their museum. We are very fortunate that we do. However, there are lots of things that you can do, especially when we are getting through the pandemic and people are more vaccinated and we can start getting together, because this is something that eventually we would like to also maybe have a physical version of it between the two of us. So it doesn't have to be something that's always virtual. It can also be something that turns into a physical thing or a Zoom thing. So a book club partnership with your library is a great first step. And the way this started is it began in March 2019, and it was specific to a special exhibit that we had called Reading Appalachia: Voices from Children's Literature. And what we did is during the course of that special exhibit, we chose books that were in the Reading Appalachia exhibit bibliography. So specific books, they were all children's books. Each month we met on air for 30 minutes and it was tagged onto one of one of the already running Radio Bristol shows. We met for 30 minutes live on air and discussed the book. So it was basically like book club, but live in front of an audience on air. And also everyone in the museum could see us and listen to the book club live if they were in the museum. We also included a blog post that went along with it that told about the book and how you could read along with us. And we did some Facebook and social media posts that went along with it. So that went on for 5 months during that special exhibit. But the Radio Bristol team and the museum and library teams were all so pleased with the response that we got to it that we decided to continue with a a monthly Radio Bristol Book Club beyond that. And what we decided from that is that we would come up with books that were related to the museum content, the musical heritage of our area, and Appalachian culture and stories and authors. And then the library and the museum basically created a database of books that both of us had chosen. Each of us choose on alternate months for the books, and then we pull readers in from either our staff or our volunteers. Next slide, please, Anne. That started in July of 2019 after the Reading Appalachia special exhibit ended, and it's continued since then. But of course, we haven't been able to meet in person since March of last year because it wasn't safe. Because when we're doing this, we are literally all face to face like this around one microphone. Because it's really important that you're able to see each other so that it's more like it's a conversation and it doesn't feel scripted at all. So what we've now doing it on Zoom, and you can see here a picture of us from one of our Zoom conversations in November on Woman Walk the Line. We also then created a Facebook post that both of us shared for, what was it? It wasn't museum, it was Shelfie Day. So instead of Selfie Day, you were supposed to take a picture of your bookshelf and show it was on your bookshelf. So the library put together a display of all of our 2021 book choices on a beautiful shelf display that we both shared on Facebook and our other social channels. And we have also made it into something where we're encouraging people to make reading books for the Radio Bristol Book Club part of their New Year's resolutions. The great thing about this, like I said, is that it's a great way to partner with your library because you can always find books that are connect to your content, connect to exhibits that you have, connect to educational programs that you're running. A book club doesn't have to be something that's aired live over the radio. It can be a Zoom thing. It can be an in-person thing once it's safe to do so. But there's also other great possibilities with your library on the book front. And one of the things that we are looking at for the future, once we find a book in the NEA Big Read list that fits Radio Bristol Book Club's sort of parameters, is actually applying together for a grant to host a whole bunch of programming around one of the Radio Bristol books for our community. So it's a really great way to partner. Next slide, please. Another thing that we do, and this is more of a partnership with other museums, is a new radio show that we started airing in October 2020. We started planning it in the summer of 2020, and it's called Museum Talk with Renee and Scotty. And again, not everyone has a radio station in their museum, but again, this could be a podcast. This could be a discussion panel where you do something on Zoom and offer it as sort of a speaker series type thing. There's other ways to adapt this, but it's a great way to partner with other cultural institutions. We had been talking about doing a museum-focused radio show for ages, but not having an availability in the schedule at the time, both within our time frame of having the time to do it, but also the Radio Bristol schedule, and just like finding the time to do it. And the pandemic sort of gave us the impetus we needed to do that. We were sitting back trying to think up more virtual programming, more educational focused programming. And we said, we've been talking about this for ages. Now is the time to do it. And the way we organized it is that my colleague Scotty and I host it. Each episode is sort of geared around either a topic or a guest interview. So it starts off with us doing either a small segment that's either called Museum Miscellany or What Are You Wondering? Museum Miscellany is like, what was the first museum, or which city has the most museums in the world? Just a little sort of fact that we dig into a little bit and share with our audience. What Are You Wondering is audience questions that are sent in to us about museum work, about the work of our museum, about what happens behind the scenes, anything to do with history. It can be anything and everything to do with museums, sort of like the idea of Ask a Curator Day, but in our radio show. Then we have about a 30-minute block that is focused in on our guest museum or institution where we interview them or where we cover a specific topic. And then we end with sharing a short article and what's going on at the Birthplace of Country Music Museum in the coming couple of weeks after that episode. What's so important about this is it gives us a platform to talk about our work, to share insights into our content, and to promote our programming. But it serves a wider educational function by presenting insights into how museums work and the importance of what they do. And that means our audiences understand us better, and it means that they are more likely to advocate and support us. But most importantly to us, it shares a platform with these other cultural organizations, historic sites, and museums. It builds recognition and understanding for them and their processes, so that the audiences aren't just learning about us, they're learning about other museums. And like I said, again, going back to that, it's just a great way to get people to support and advocate within your community, because they're learning more about what you do and what hard work you're putting into what you're doing. And it's opening up this pathway for collaborative community, and that's really important. Next slide. It's gotten stuck again, it looks like. So I'll just keep talking and you'll catch up with me.
Yeah, I'll catch up. Give me a minute.
One of the other things that's been really cool about the museum talk is that the partnerships we've formed with other institutions. Since we started airing this weekly radio show, which is on Thursdays at 11 a.m., you should listen, it's an hour long, it's awesome, is that we've featured a lot of Tennessee museums. And in fact, our first guest was actually the East Tennessee Historical Society with Rebecca Piesheimer, talking about being a collections, the curator of collections there. This picture just shows some of the images that our guest museums and cultural organizations have shared with us. We have talked to museums all over our sort of on our local doorstep, but also much further afield. In a minute, I'll show you a map about that. But first, I just wanted to talk about some of the partnerships we've had. Like I said, several Tennessee institutions, the East Tennessee Historical Society, the Heritage Alliance, the National Civil Rights Museum at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis. But also it's been ways to continue our story. So for instance, we did a show with the Indiana Historical Society talking about their work, but at the time they actually have one of our objects in their special exhibit. And you can see in the top, I guess it's your left, no, top right image, a fiddle in the background and one of the cases in the background. And that's an object that we loaned them that's on loan at their museum for over a year. So we got to also connect with them about how museums support each other long distance by sharing objects. We've talked to a museum in London, to a conservator in London, about the work of conservation in the Wallace collection in London. And our interview with the National Civil Rights Museum also enabled us to create programming that was specific to things that were going on in our community at the time. We interviewed them during the week of the Martin Luther King Jr. celebration here in the Tri-Cities. We were then able to share that programming as a radio show and from our archives to talk about the work of the Civil Rights Museum and the life of Martin Luther King within that larger community event. Next slide, please. We'll come back to that. You can see it in a minute. It's going to be that map I was telling you about that just shows you the extent of where we have talked to people. The other great thing that has come out of this is that not only have we built a platform that enables other museums to share their stories and their work, but it's also given us the opportunity to share ourselves with other museums. Out of the Museum Talk radio show, we have been invited now twice onto the Durham Museum in Omaha, Nebraska's live educational program, Museum Live, where we have been one of their segments once about the banjo and its origins from Africa, and once about Mother Maybelle Carter and her prowess as an auto harp player for Women's History Month. And so not only has it meant that it's opened up opportunities for us to give people that platform, but it's also meant that they've then invited us to their platforms, which has been wonderful. And you can see here just the extent of the places we've talked to so far. Unfortunately, I couldn't get a big enough map to include London, but they're on there too. Next slide, please. That's okay, I'll keep going. So that just gives you an idea of the ways that libraries and museums can partner together, the ways that they can sort of amplify each other's voices and work and content. I hope it's given everyone some creative ideas for ways that you can look to your community for these types of partnerships, and beyond your community to the museum and cultural organization community beyond your sort of local area. And, you know, the impact of museum, library, and community partnerships is far reaching. It's not just about the things that are happening locally within those partnerships, but for instance, we've recently had Museums Advocacy Day at the end of February. And that's a great thing to talk to your legislators about, to talk about the way that you're partnering with other entities within your community to provide even more educational opportunities and programming to your audiences and to your schools and to the people within your region. You know, it's a good way to sort of emphasize to them how important the work that we do is, and to give them some really great real world examples of that. And you know, I did that when at that museum's advocacy day, and got some really interesting questions, especially from some of our regional legislators, about these partnerships. The other thing is that a lot of funding bodies want to see these partnerships. They want to see us working together. So the NEH, the NEA, the IMLS are often talking about collaborations and partnerships. And like I mentioned earlier, one thing that the Bristol Public Library and the Birthplace of Country Music Museum want to do is to work together for an NEA Big Read grant as soon as we find a book that fits in with our Radio Bristol Book Club. But then, of course, like I said, you've got those really tangible benefits to your local community, to your regional area. And now, with all that we've learned in the last year through the pandemic about how to reach virtual audiences, our impact is now going beyond those local and regional communities, and we can really look to ways to partner further afield and then have impact further afield. So that finishes our talk on the ways that museums, libraries, and community and municipalities, that is a hard word to say, it's tricky, can work together. I hope that you all enjoyed that. Of course, we want you to contact us if you have anything that you want to tell us about or anything you want to share with us. We'll move on to the questions in a second, but I just also wanted to remind you to fill out the survey at the end. But we do have quite a few questions here, so let's get started with those. The first question is, how would you recommend reaching out to a potential partner that you don't have a current connection with? Anne, why don't you start there?
I mean, that's always, you know, a trick. I would, if you even know someone who's tangentially connected, that if they're a member of your organization or if they're a volunteer, a board member, that would be a way. But if you don't have any of that, I would just say start going to stuff they're doing. Like if they're hosting programs, if they do their own exhibits, you know, if they need help, if they put it on a call for assistance, find a way to, you know, get inside the organization, make yourself known, meet the people. So I would just start with, if you have like no one who works with you and with them or in any sort of capacity, just, you know, making yourself available to them and just going to their stuff and being present and introducing, I think, is the first step I would recommend.
And to build on that, I would say another good thing is that sometimes you still aren't able to do that. So for instance, we've partnered with the YWCA a few times with their Tech Girls program, but we were never going to be able to go participate in those programs because obviously it's for kids and it's not the kind of thing you can go in as a public member. But sometimes if you are going to have to approach someone cold, is just be sure you have your story well thought out of what you want to do with them and how it benefits them, that it's not just about them helping you, it's about you helping them, you know. And we did that several years ago, back in like 2016, again, to do a radio show with the Tech Girls for Museum Day Live. And since then, we've been able to partner with them many times since then because of that initial cold call that we made to them. That was both to benefit us and to benefit them, but just making it clear, they're going to be a lot of organizations are going to be excited to find new ways to work together with other organizations. Brenda, did you have anything you wanted to add? You're muted.
I really do like the outreach, the cold call, because it can bring great results.
Yeah, because like us, a lot of people are looking for ways to be supported within their community and to reach more audience members, and, you know, be okay with them not being ready to partner with you, but it might sort of spark something in them for later.
Mm-hmm.
Our next question is, when you collaborate on a project, do you choose one person to be the project lead, or do you make decisions collaboratively? I can jump into that initially. For instance, with the Radio Bristol Book Club, we work collaboratively in that we are making sure that both of us are choosing books. So like 6 months of the year, the museum's choosing the books, 6 months of the year, the library's choosing the books, and they get to make that choice themselves and decide, you know, which books sort of fit in with the theme and the focus of the Radio Bristol Book Club. But the museum, because the Radio Bristol is part of our exhibits, and because it was initially our idea, the museum has taken the organizational lead more than anything. So being sure that that we have the pre-record date set up and making sure people know what to do to get ready for the actual meetings, the actual discussions. You know, if you're the book picker, like if the library's picked the book, they're the ones who will write the blog post and send in the questions for the readers. But the museum will then organize it and be sure everyone has that information. The other thing that we've been doing with Radio Bristol Book Club that has come more to the fore, especially since the pandemic, is having the last half hour of that show being an interview with the author or an interview with someone who is related to the topic. And the museum has taken the lead on that, again, simply because of being part of the radio station or having the radio station as part of us. But in general, it's been both a collaborative, but with someone who's sort of making sure it's organized.
No, I would agree with that, that you need like the central point person, but you still need everyone, every voice in the conversation. You just need the person who kind of synthesize it and make sure like the tasks are assigned as needed.
Yeah. And I mean, you want it to always feel like a collaboration between the two. It never wants to feel like someone's taking over. And so that's a great way to do it, is to have those conversations, but like you say, someone who's checking in with everyone. Let's see. There's one more. Let me just scroll down. Here we go. Has reaching out and collaborating with fellow museums, libraries, municipalities been difficult during COVID-19?
I mean, I just say from our perspective, you know, definitely initially when we all had like the, you know, that, oh, what is this? We don't know, the fear, how do we do any programming? But, you know, the challenge, I think a lot of museums and libraries met it and rose to it about how do we still serve our communities during these times? So actually, I think in a weird way, it helped with partnerships because we were all looking for ways to get through this together. So, you know, like I said, we were able to include audiences and museums into our you know, programs, like in Cincinnati, that we would never be able to, like, physically in person. So I think in a weird way, it grew some partnerships.
Yeah, and I would agree with that, is that it's made it definitely, like you said, people are interested in finding ways to reach these virtual audiences. So they're very open to ideas and suggestions. But, you know, I found with the museum talk, even when we're contacting someone cold, they're jumping on the chance to be part of it. Because, you know, some of them we've had contacts with, sometimes we haven't, and they've been really eager to do it because they do see the value in it, both for us and for them. And, you know, it's been so interesting is that they've all jumped on the chance of it, but they've all reacted. It's funny, for Museum Talk, we ask each of our museum guests to pick 2 songs to go along with their interview. And they love to talk to us, but they really freak out about picking the songs. Every single one of them has been like, this is so hard. This says something deep and meaningful about me.
It's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure.
It's a lot of pressure, which doesn't even occur to us, I guess, as a music museum. We're just like, there's so many great songs out there. Let me see if we've got, what about you, Brenda? What do you think? Do you think it's been easier or more difficult with COVID?
I think it's become easier after we got through that initial learning period. That was a challenge. That what are we going to do? How are we going to handle this? Initial panic. But I think it's easier now.
And, you know, from what I can see, that's the last of our questions, but something that I started thinking about when we were talking that we had never talked about when we were sort of planning for this session is, I think another great advantage to working with libraries is that almost all libraries have children's librarians. And for some of us, reaching the smaller, the littles isn't something that our museums know how to do as easily as it is like middle school or upper elementary, middle school. And your children's librarians can be a really great resource for ways to reach that audience, because they reach that audience all the time and they do it really well. So I think that libraries provide a really great resource just on their expertise in working with kids in particular. Let me just double check that I haven't missed any questions. Nope, it looks like I've got them all. I think we'll, unless anyone has anything else that they'd like to say from the panel before we close. Brenda, Ann, do you have anything you want to say in conclusion?
No, just, like this, presentation was a collaboration. Just go find your partners and collaborate with them. So now is the time to try.
Yeah.
A great experience.
And the time to continue, because this, like everyone has said in all of the sessions I've been in, virtual is not going away even when the world is supposedly back to normal. So.
Yes.
But thank you everyone for being here with us. We really appreciate you taking the time. I'll just remind everyone to fill out the survey. If you scroll down to the underneath the description for this panel, you will find a link to that, and we'd love to hear your feedback. And we're almost at the end of the conference, but it's been a really great one. So thanks for being here with us.
Thank you.